Hello and welcome back to 001 Radio Weekly. We've got a packed show for you today. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined by some wonderful co-hosts, Wyatt.
Hi.
Alex.
Hi.
And our brand new individual Brett.
Hello, I'm individual Brett.
Yep. He has to be very individual.
Yes.
Alright, so we got a topic for today. We're going to be talking about sci-fi games. We like to do topics now. It's a topical thing. That and there's not a lot of video game news this week.
Yeah, that's true.
We're still waiting on the Microsoft showcase. We don't have anything major happening. So right now we're in the lull time, which means we get to talk about video games the way we want to.
I haven't done that before.
Wow, what a revolutionary idea!
We never get to talk about what we actually want to talk about on this podcast, and we all have a horrible time.
Yeah, look, we talked about Smash for a little too long last time.
Wait, what?
we talked about Smash through abuse allegations. It was a little too long.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There was some confusion behind the scenes with that. So this time we've got an actual document. At least I do. No one else has seen this because I like to surprise people. And Wyatt and Alex. Wyatt and Alex know that we have a thing we do at the start of every podcast. All right?
It's our favorite part of the show.
It's our favorite part of the show. It's called the game. In this case, the game is called Squad Up. And this game it's not really, this is kind of really stretching the definition of game because there's not really any point to this. It's just we're going to say what our favorite crew and ship combo from sci-fi games is. So think like the Normandy, the Ebon Hawk from KOTOR, or any other sci-fi ship you can think of, like the Unreliable from Outer Worlds is in there. Just tell me why it's your favorite. We're going to start with, you know what, Brett, you're new, so you get to go first.
Oh, jeez. I barely got a chance to think about it, but you not just because you said it, but also because you said it. Outer Wilds. Well, you said Outer Worlds, but Outer Wilds. Because everybody thinks of them interchangeably because their names are unfortunately the exact same.
And very similar games just in general.
It's kind of.
That's a topic for another podcast.
It's not so much the crew because the crew is just you, but the ship of Outer Wilds. I'm going to slip up and say the wrong name for sure at least once, and I don't want anyone to correct me. Just let me think I'm right. But it looks like it's held together with like wood and nails and stuff, and it doesn't look actually airtight. And it's like a pile of junk that a kid would make and call a spaceship, but it actually works. And the whole game kind of works like that. So it makes me really happy because it makes me feel like a kid again in that way.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Outer Wilds too. It's a good spaceship to throw in here. Mm-hmm. All right. Alex, how about you? This is why we had you go second, so you had time to think. But you...
He was busy listening.
Foolish.
Extreme attention.
How wholesome.
Yeah, it's probably going to be Outer Worlds because that was the most recent sci-fi game that I played.
Here's the test. Can you name a crew member from the Outer Worlds?
A crew member or all of them?
Any of them.
Ellie, Parvati, Felix.
All right, that's impressive. I could name Parvati and Ellie. That's
the preacher, whatever his name is, or pastor. And of course, the favorite
Vicar.
one that I forget the name of, the sweeper bot.
Sam.
I just got the sweeper bot. I haven't actually done anything with him yet.
He's the guy that I got first.
And the preacher guy, his name is Vicar, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
I think that's ringing bells that haven't been rung in a while. So I'm gonna assume that's the correct.
It's a name I haven't
correct
heard.
name. All right. So Wyatt, we saved you for last because I don't know.
I have the most controversial.
I know what you're gonna say. I know what you're gonna say. It's on this list as well. I just didn't say it to see if you would say it.
You're gonna make me rage quit the podcast the first time I'm here, Wyatt?
That's the whole point. That's why you're here. We need some drama. Brett. Come on now. I'm gonna have to go with the Normandy.
Okay.
Controversial pick. I know.
Okay, that's less controversial than I thought you were gonna go.
Yeah,
What
that's
what did you think I was?
I thought you were about to say the Tempest,
Oh,
which is
I don't-
Andromeda's ship.
I don't hate the
Ooh.
Tempest. I don't hate the Tempest.
That would have
to
been.
be clear,
Why do you
They're
think the
not-
Normandy is a controversial pick?
because that was the joke.
Oh, well, you said it so straight that I was like, I was ready for you to say Andromeda ship because I thought you were about to go actual
No,
hard
no, no,
opinions.
no, no, no. I don't
Turns out
hate
you're just
the-
a mainstream boy.
I don't. Well, it's like because I'm thinking about it, it's like okay, the Normandy is like the most obvious pick in the world, right? But when I kept going through like different options in my head, there was no like crew of people that I cared about more in a game.
Yeah,
that makes sense. It's
Like-
like jam packed with people.
Yeah, it's jam, and all of them are great. Like all of them are super memorable, especially Tali, one of my favorite characters ever. And to be clear, like the Tempest crew isn't bad. They're not the Normandy crew. you know, they're fine, but they're not.
you don't spend
they're
3
not-
whole games with them.
Hmm.
No, you could make them more interesting, but no one cares at this point. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I gotta vote for the Ebon Hawk just because I miss Star Wars RPGs, like full blown RPGs, and
Amen.
Okay, man.
KOTOR were some great games. Yeah, that's my vote. All right, now we got some sci-fi stuff to talk about. We have a loose guideline here. In reality, there's not that many hard sci-fi video games. Because I was originally we were gonna lean more into like space sci-fi, thinking like Mass Effect and Star Wars games, but there's not many of those. There's basically Mass Effect, Fallen Order, and Outer Worlds filling that niche. We
I mean,
might
not
get
many,
Starfield.
not many new ones. There's a lot.
Yeah,
of,
that's what I mean.
There's a lot of older ones for Star Wars, but like I feel like a lot of people in this like gaming generation haven't even heard of them. Like I don't know, like you, if I were to walk up to a man on the street and talk to him about like Kyle Katarn or something, he wouldn't know who the hell he is. But
He'd just be like,
he's not Luke Skywalker.
he'd just be like, Gazoom tight.
Gesundheit.
He'd probably run away. Probably don't go to anyone on the street and ask them anything about Star Wars. Actually, that would probably be the better
Yeah,
thing
that's
to
a
do.
smart idea in this
Look, and
day
if you're
and age.
going to, 6 feet away.
Yeah.
Minimum. Yeah, we hear the name Kyle Katarn whispered in hushed voices. We got. Does Force Unleashed count?
Oh,
I'd say
I
that
don't
counts.
think so.
it's not really. Well, it's sci-fi, but it's not space sci-fi.
Yeah. See, that's what I
There's
mean.
not a lot of like
There's so
space
little space
trotting
sci-fi.
adventures.
Star Wars is more space fantasy, I guess.
Yeah, it's the difference between science fiction and science fantasy, right? Because those are two very separate things. And like
Yeah.
the obvious comparison is, I would say that Star Trek is science fiction and Star Wars is science fantasy.
Oh,
Because
so
they
then
have
what
very-
about? Finish what you were gonna say.
Because they have very different focuses in terms of like, one is a lot more technical and focuses on the more like minute aspects of like their technology in the world, and whereas Star Wars is more about characters and this big adventure and stuff like that.
It's a good point.
You're right. But what about Clone Commando or whatever? that
Republic
game is called?
Commando.
Yeah,
Republic
Republic
Commando?
Commando. That's just
That's
like a
a-
straight up sci-fi shooter.
Well, that's like a war movie that's like happens to be science fantasy, I think. Like it's more of a focus of like this squad as soldiers than like being super technical, I think.
Yeah. I mean, so for a lot of people that may not be super into sci-fi, sci-fantasy, the delineation between science fiction and science fantasy is pretty gray. It's hard to really distinguish them, and in all honesty, it doesn't matter that much. Science fiction usually leans more towards explaining everything, whereas science fantasy tends to follow like mythical story structures and tends to avoid explaining things. Like the Force is a good example of something
Like
that,
midichlorians.
yeah, like midichlorians, which
Of course, was a good example.
it was a good example. It still is because they're backpedaling on that pretty hard. So,
God.
Good for them. Good for them.
so yeah, Star Wars pretty solidly science fantasy. Destiny, I'd say, falls under that same bracket.
Yeah.
And
But-
and
Oh, go ahead, Wyatt. Go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of like of like trying to sort of narrow that definition, one thing that I thought about, because when you announced like the subject that we were talking about, one thing I thought about with games specifically is how they use their science fiction setting. And so you have some games that are like Mass Effect that use it as like a setting for the story and to set up this world, whereas you have games like Titanfall where they use a science fiction setting in order to have these really interesting game mechanics and less about fleshing out the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's two different ways of doing it. It's like Titanfall, you can't have Titanfall without it being science fiction. So it's in this futuristic setting to justify the fact that there are these massive robots. But it doesn't really have a story that like goes into the mechanics of it that much. And for that instance, it doesn't matter. Like no one really cares. It's more about having these awesome mechanics and having the sci-fi setting allow them to do that.
That's a good way to put it. We have a lot of like pseudo sci-fi shooters that are really just modern military shooters in a sci-fi backdrop. We get stuff like Warframe, which is definitely leaning into the fantasy aspect of things.
Yeah,
being a space pirate ninja.
Yeah, space pirate ninjas.
There is a lot of like explanation, but I feel it's just like more lore than it is like here's the document explaining how the teleporter works and how also it slowly kills the people that use it because this is sci-fi and it has to be sad. Like
it's like it's the delineation between knowing that Newtonian physics exist and then having to take advantage of them to fly your spaceship,
and then having to learn like particle physics to play the game correctly.
Subtle dig at Star Citizen.
Ooh. Well, I was going to say No Man's Sky too, because No Man's Sky, when it was coming out, it had all these like, oh well, this planet is shaped this way if it's like, you know,
it tried to explain things,
stuff like that.
Didn't quite work.
None of that really ended up mattering. Like it didn't end up being a thing. Like having planets that were a certain distance from the sun doesn't. I think even today it still doesn't affect like the creation of a planet or anything like that.
Yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny that. I haven't played enough No Man's Sky to know if that affects anything. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of No Man's Sky's issue is that the worlds have to account for the fact that you can start on any of them, so all of them have to have most of the resources. Yeah. So you can never get stranded, which means they all end up feeling very samey, especially with the old algorithms they use for world gen. Mm-hmm. They have some newer stuff now that's a lot better, but I remember when on launch it came out, it was very, very samey. You couldn't really find unique stuff, and there was also all the whole debacle about the flight assist in No Man's Sky, where you couldn't like invert your ship on the ground and fly through things.
It was impossible to crash your ship.
Yeah.
Sounds nice in theory, but
it makes it very unfun.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to our first official question. What's your favorite sci-fi game? We're starting off easy. Anyone can speak up here. We're not going to go in orders. Just whoever thinks of one.
I'm kind of torn. I've already brought these two up already, but I'm kind of torn between two games. One of them is Titanfall 2, just because I think that's like one of the best first-person shooters ever made, like period. Oh, yeah. At least for me.
Yeah.
Like it's right up there. But then on the flip side of that, again, I've already mentioned Mass Effect, but like that entire series, there's very few examples of games that have like engaged me in a story as much as that has. Like I cried like such a little bitch at the end of the third game. Like I was so emotionally just like it had its hooks in me entirely at that point, and I got very emotional. So I'm kind of torn because it's like
video games.
Oh, what a
nerd.
What a wuss, yeah. But like on one end, it's like you have one of the greatest shooters ever made, and on the other hand, it's you have one of the best sci-fi stories, or just stories in a game in general, with some of the best characters. So I'm kind of caught because they're very, very different, and I can't decide which one I like more.
Yeah, that's a fair thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
The sci-fi is very broad as well, and we're kind of including science fantasy in this because there's not enough of it existing in games to really force a delineation between the two.
Yeah. I feel like I feel like you can't really have like a science fantasy have its own topic podcast episode, but you can definitely have cyberpunk have its own like.
Yeah, we
Topic
are
episode.
gonna have a
We're not
cyberpunk
talking about it now.
episode. At
Oh,
some
are
point.
we ever? Are we ever?
Oh boy, dude, that Games Club episode is gonna be incredible.
Dude, that's gonna be 5 parts. I swear to God, it's gonna be 5 parts. I'm calling it.
All right, so we got Wyatt's favorite. How about you two?
That sounds
What's
like a
your
threat.
favorite sci-fi.
You want to go first, Alex?
I think Alex is still mulling it over, thinking
Brain's
about
cooking.
the sci-fi.
Well, I think, I suppose in his absence, I'll continue. Wyatt Titanfall 2 is like also one of my favorite games ever. It's so satisfying, and I think having it as the example of one of the things that just uses the sci-fi setting for gameplay is like perfect, because I think it does it better than most things that do that. Like every level has a different like core set piece mechanic that you can't have in
Mhm.
another game, and it's crazy that you can
Yeah.
have like a whole like is it 11 missions, or is that too short? Like a satisfactory amount of missions where every single one feels different and
Yeah.
it doesn't get boring.
It's perfectly paced
Yeah, for
in that
sure.
regard.
I got.
You're gonna have to wait your turn, Alex.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm not done,
Oh.
actually.
I have no idea what's going on right now. There was a lot of audio lag, and I missed the
Oh.
the turn order that was going on.
Oh no.
Well, we didn't hear anything from you, so Brett's going.
It's
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
I'm not going to take too much longer, because if I start talking about the other game that's tied for my favorite, I will never stop, and
boy.
it's got to be Halo 3.
Mm.
And I like, for every obvious reason that any human being has ever liked Halo 3,
Mhm.
like it's just such one of the neatest little packages ever to be released in like the entire history of games. Like there's so much polish.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. It's fun in multiplayer and campaign and Forge. And I'm going to stop there before I start barfing everywhere.
We could also say Halo 3 did just come out on PC for anyone that has
Yes,
never
it did.
played it.
That's true.
Halo 3 is a fantastic shooter. The PC port is excellent, and you should absolutely check it out.
I like to imagine all of like the PC only players that are finally getting their hands on this.
Oh,
series.
yeah.
I feel so happy for them, dude. I'm.
Oh yeah.
It's like welcome to the party.
Welcome back.
You guys waited long enough. My God.
So, would you say
Finally
the Master?
finished the
Sorry,
film.
is the Master Chief Collection worth it?
Oh,
probably-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, if you get Game Pass, you get the Master Chief Collection. So if you
Yep.
have any interest in other Game Pass games, that's a great way to play them.
Dude, Game Pass kicks so much.
You can also play. We
Like-
talked about Outer Worlds. That's on Game Pass too. It's good value. All right, so Alex, you had something queued up, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And this was mainly because, well, actually, I'm gonna say Fallout 1 as definitely more science fiction than science fantasy.
Yeah.
Just because of how they handle it with the lore and such back when Obsidian, also the makers of Outer Worlds, made it. But I was first introduced to Fallout 1 during game history and production, when we had to play a game and then do a report on it.
Oh hell yeah.
And I
Everyone's
kept
favorite.
following
Some
my-
deep cuts.
and I still go back to play it.
Yeah, Fallout 1 is a fun game. I think it holds up startlingly well.
Oh yeah,
The faces can be a little funny at times, but aside from that, the gameplay's aged pretty well. I think if you're into that style, the CRPG style. All right, so we're through our favorite sci-fi games. We're not going to dwell too much on just saying what our favorites are, because we do have a podcast called Games Club on the side you can listen to, where we talk about specific games. We haven't done any
Sorry.
sci-fi yet, but we absolutely should.
It's our podcast side hustle.
Yeah, it's our side hustle that you can see on the normal feed, because we can't afford multiple feeds. All right. So now we're going to get more into the space side of things. And or the lack of it is probably a good way to put it as of recent years. So do you like space as a setting, and do you feel that games can fully take advantage of that setting? We have Star Citizen, which has been going on in development for God knows how long at this point, which probably will come out eventually, but no one knows when or how finished it will be. Aside from that, the game I was going to mention in the favorite games is called X4. It's this weird little Eurojank economy simulator, but it's a first-person space simulator as well, so you can like walk around on stations and get in your ships and everything. Really interesting game, but it's made by a small team. There's a lot of jank, so it's a unique take on space. That it's weird to me that so many indie teams try to do these space games, but we don't have any AAA attempts aside from Starfield, which we'll talk a little bit about later.
Or what's the thing that Bethesda's planning on doing?
Starfield. Yeah. Oh. We got Starfield and Star Citizen, although Star Citizen specifically is in a weird spot because the dev team is veteran developers but a new team. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know what's shaking out there. And the game has like the largest budget of anything ever. So
yeah, really.
Yeah, we'll see how that pans out. Maybe. At some point in the distant future.
Can I make a petition right now to just have an episode in the future where we discuss Eurojank games?
Oh, absolutely.
Because, A, I love that term, and also B, I think it would be really interesting because there are a lot of really good ones.
Oh, I got the entire category of like Elex in there.
So, as someone who is unfamiliar with the term, not me, but I'm sure there are people who are. Can you describe to those people what the hell Eurojank?
Yeah, Eurojank is just essentially think AA games, so games that have enough of a budget to sort of graphically or on some level compete with the AAA space, but have a much smaller budget and tend to cut corners to get that done. So I think the studio that's kind of coined this term is one of them is Spiders, who recently made Greedfall, and Greedfall is kind of broken out of that Eurojank space and has just become like a good video game. But generally, Eurojank refers to a game with really cool ideas that just has some weird bugs and like mechanical ideas that maybe don't work. We talked about Elex, the Risen series of RPGs is like this. So many space sims. Absolutely all the space sims on Steam pretty much are like this. But Eurojank games can be really, really fun if you can put up with the jank.
So again, I knew that, but for the people who didn't in our audience, that's.
I'm glad you felt the need to reconfirm that.
Yeah,
your own knowledge of Eurojank.
Just so that just so everyone's clear. I'm
asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend
doesn't know about Eurojank.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. What Brett said. Yeah. That. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
All right. So back to the question. So do you think any games have fully executed on space as a setting so far? Because we have things like Mass Effect, which have it kind of as a backdrop, almost, but you never really interact with the fact that you're in like the vast reaches of space.
I'm not comfortable saying that No Man's Sky has reached that potential, but it is clawing its way up there with every update.
Yeah.
It is making some excellent strides to get there.
I think it's certainly very close to reaching the potential of like exploration in space. If you really want to just explore some cool planets and see some things.
They announced a new update like a couple days ago, I think, which is like
there's abandoned derelict ships now.
It felt very like Alien-esque.
Yeah.
Where you're like searching derelict ships with like creepy aliens on them.
That's cool.
Yeah. Every update, man, I'm like, I gotta go back and play that again. And then I forget.
Yeah, good game for a Games Club episode, I think.
Yeah.
Especially considering it's multiplayer.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating game to talk about.
Yeah.
We'll save it for the Games Club episode, but it's a fascinating game to talk about, I think.
Yeah, and I think so X4, the game I've been playing, which a lot of people do like, it's a pretty popular franchise. And it's been the X series has been going for like 15, 20 years at this point. It's a long running series of games. And the thing with them is there's the illusion that you're in space, but then you see all these like game mechanic things that are built to kind of block you out from taking advantage of that. Like everything is divided into sectors, so they never have to load too many things at once. It's not fully open world. Elite Dangerous kind of goes the open world route, but that game suffers from not having a lot of things to do in that world, aside from just like space trekking, which is fine, but I think it's not fully realizing that sort of thing.
Well, that's like the big catch-22 with like trying to take advantage of space, is that you run into the Assassin's Creed Odyssey issue of, we have all this space and we don't know what to put in it other than really shitty side quests.
Yeah, space is the ultimate big map, too big map.
Yeah. Because like it's supposed to be this like never-ending thing where it's like, oh my god, there's all these new planets to explore, but there's only so much that you can do to not make each planet or area feel similar in some way.
Yeah, I think that's why. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Even with No Man's Sky, it's like, again, it's putting in the work in terms of like, post-launch updates and stuff, but at its core, you're still mining the same things to do the same.
Yeah, if you don't dig the exploration, No Man's Sky doesn't really have much for you. Yeah. We also have. I was going to talk briefly about Star Citizen and the state it was in last time I played it, which was a long, long time ago, and how basically they didn't have anything space ready in it then. It was just like essentially a flight sim, a good flight sim, but a flight sim. So it wasn't that much different from something like Ace Combat. the Japanese
I want
flight
to talk
sim
about
games.
those one day. God, I love those games so much.
Great games. But yeah, I think we definitely haven't seen something take advantage of it. So what I like to see is like Outer Wilds does the solar system approach of limit us to one system and then fill that system with interesting things. Which I think capitalizes on like that sense of vastness while still managing to create this setting that is very unique and interesting and has things to do.
It's crazy how small that game makes you feel, and like, because the planets are all vaguely almost like Mario Galaxy sized. Like you can see the curvature of every one as you're like walking on them, but still, like, I think the bigness of it comes from like, it's physically small, but there's so many things to do that it feels like huge, and every planet has like multiple places that are completely different in it, so it feels like there are a lot of locations per world, and even though it's small, it feels big. And I think games, I don't know if they will, but they should kind of take that from it, because it's trying to focus on the bigness of space in a physical way. You get No Man's Sky, where it's just like trillions of worlds that are all the same.
Yep.
So it's either the same or they're empty, or there's no point to exploring besides just exploring. And I think there is something to be said for that, but at the same time, that limits you in what you can actually do in the terms of like, I'm super interested to see how Starfield comes out and like what approach they're taking, because we don't know anything about Starfield really, aside from that it's an RPG set in space, and they showed a space station as a visual like a year and a half ago at this point. So we really don't know much, but I'm hoping they take the approach of having a very focused environment or an area, and you actually exploring that area and getting familiar with everything. There's like something I would take away from it is like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen or read The Expanse, but The Expanse is a sci-fi fantasy series. It's more sci-fi than fantasy. That kind of echoes a lot of what OG Star Trek was about, but it's also very much set in the Sol system. You don't really get this big opening of the galaxy until very late in the series. You're mostly focused on what's happening around Earth and that immediate set of planets, which I think creates a really unique setting and also allows for a lot of exploration. So I would love to see a game come out that really capitalizes on that type of exploration, especially with a AAA budget. So Outer Wilds is fantastic, but there's really only a handful of characters.
Yeah.
And it works because of that time cutoff that you have, where you can never be doing more than 20 minutes of a thing at a time.
Yeah. It helps also that the story is very good and touching, but like if it was like a big like exploration focused game, like I don't know. It would take a lot more to fill a whole solar system with a lot of individual stories instead of
Yeah.
one like focused one.
Well,
I
that was
don't
the
know.
problem. That was the problem that Andromeda had, was that, the original
Yeah.
the original trilogy, it was like, it was kind of open ended in space, but not really when you think about it. But it was because it was trying to focus on this story and these characters, and then Andromeda, kind of understandably wants these larger explorative planets and stuff like that. And I don't hate that approach, but the problem is, as soon as you like stretch your games out in like in terms of like how much real estate and space they pick up, like that can really damage the pacing of like the central story, which is what happened with Andromeda.
Absolutely. I'm curious, now that we're getting more info on Star Wars games coming out, if there's going to be a Star Wars take on something like this. Because we have so many settings that are built up for Star Wars that you don't really need to populate a whole galaxy. You just need to have the specific locales. Like, you could set an entire game on Coruscant. Man, I wish 1313 came out, but...
Don't
Why would you bring
so
that
kind.
up?
How dare you?
Why would you do that?
But yeah, that's a setting that I think has the advantage of being able to portray vastness through the variety of media around it, instead of having to rely on like a game being huge. It can then point to something like novels that explore systems, so you get the sense that the galaxy is huge, but you don't need to actually have that hugeness in one piece of media.
Yeah, and if you were to attempt something like that, so much of the work of making a game like this is done for you, because I can't imagine, like, you want to make this giant game that's like spans so many planets. You still have to come up with like a universe and these alien races and all this technology and stuff on your own. Whereas with Star Wars, it's like you got so much material to work with, and none of it you have to make yourself because it's already been established. So taking one of those large like space exploration games, so much of the work is done for you. You just have to make sure that you uphold to it, which is a job in and of itself, but you don't have to populate it with your own stuff because it's already
You don't need to make a universe. You just need to create the assets for it, essentially.
And make sure you're true to it as well, or else you're going to piss off.
Which is a large amount of work.
Yes.
As long as your name isn't Kathleen or Kennedy, then you'll probably do a fine job at that.
Kathleen and or Kennedy.
Yeah, interchangeable.
Yeah, okay, especially when they're combined. That's just
Yeah, that's the pure evil right there.
Then you get the Dark Lord of creating Star Wars content right there.
All right.
Oh boy.
So yeah, leading off of that question, what do you think it would take for a space sim type game or any game taking place in space to see more mainstream success? So I'm talking something that's not quite like a Mass Effect, not just an RPG, but like a new thing. What do you think it would have to do to see a lot of success? Because I think right now, especially, people are pretty not sated for space stuff, but wary of it. From like No Man's Sky coming out, Star Citizen being this weird story of maybe I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it's just not really there.
I think what I'm going to say is going to sound kind of gimmicky, but handle VR integration well, and especially with mechanics like stuff that you don't really see in many things, like when if you would go to repair parts of a space station or something, going out on a convincing spacewalk. How are you going to portray that without getting your player sick when they're when they're supposed to think that they're in a zero gravity environment, when they're standing on in their living room floor?
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because like VR mixed with being inside of a plane cockpit or a space cockpit is like a dream. Was like a match made in heaven for so many people.
Oh, totally.
And so if you can nail that atmosphere and that look of like being able to turn your head and interact with the cockpit, like there you go, like copy sold right there.
I mean, that's Elite has seen a lot of success from doing that. Their VR version is incredibly well made, and I know it sees a lot of play.
There was like a space combat game that came out like at the launch of the not the Vive, the Oculus Rift. There was like this space combat game. It was it Eve related? I think it was Eve related.
There's been like a few Eve related shooters that have maybe existed.
Yeah, but like it was like a VR. It was a VR game, and you were able to like look around in your cockpit while you were fighting.
Oh yeah, that was an Eve game. It was an Eve game.
And it looked really cool.
I think that game had the issue of it was like a set of missions, and there was no larger game to it. It was just this preset small list of things you could do.
Proof of concept.
Yeah, it was essentially a proof of concept that was sold for money. Which I know a lot of people that played it were like, yeah, this is really cool, but you're not going to want to play it after the first playthrough because it's the same thing. There's no variation.
Right.
And I think one thing for me that hits me pretty hard when I'm playing something like Elite is that Elite really goes for having tons of control over your ship, which certain people really enjoy. But I think for a mainstream audience, it gets a little too complex.
It gets simulation-y.
Yeah, well, Elite is a space sim. Fully, and I don't think Elite should change. I'm just saying if Starfield, essentially, if Starfield has the ability to fly a ship, it needs to be towing the line between complex and simple, which is one of the few things I think X4 does really, really well, is that the ship controls are very simple. You move the ship by aiming with your mouse, and then you have like controls over all your weapons, and you can set weapon groups, but you never have to deal with things like moving power around or
that's obnoxious.
The biggest issue I had with Elite was when I had to bind keys to weird esoteric things that I'll use once every 10 hours. We're like, maybe I'll need a button to drop my cargo, but I'll have to press it like instantly if a pirate's on me, but I'm never going to have to press it otherwise. So it's having to remember that kind of thing that I think that needs to be kind of cut out for games like Starfield.
That like immediately destroys like any hope for a casual audience because you're just not going to want to learn that. And like, casual, but they're important because I am one sometimes. I don't always want to play competitive stuff where I have to focus my whole brain into it. Like most people that play games are people that just want to play like Mario or Pokemon, and that's fine.
There's nothing wrong with
what games are for.
Yeah,
and I'm usually in like something like Destiny for the single player experience, for that good story and lore.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm forced into PvP so often.
Yeah, you're forced to do things you don't want to do, which is something that space games especially, I think, can fall into that kind of open world trap.
And it's not good enough to make me want to do it more.
Yeah, of maybe something's just not fun, and then the game will make you do it, and you're just like, I don't want to do this.
I think my main thing is like really, it might sound like stupid and simple, but like for a space game to like work as like a huge, whether it's like AAA or not, like a huge title that becomes really popular, like I think it just has to be like, it just has to actually work. Because like all these things like Andromeda and No Man's Sky, like people know about them whether they've played them or not, because like at launch and sometimes to this day they are broken pieces of garbage, and it was funny, and like that's kind of a death sentence for any game, and like you can fix it completely after that, but like unless you have like a dedicated audience, like Battlefield 4 was really bad at launch, and then DICE fixed it, and then everyone got happy. But like,
and For Honor had the same thing.
I feel like for such a huge game, it'd be hard to make it be like stable and polished. The list of examples for games that maybe aren't are like all the list of other space games, pretty much.
Yeah,
like to have the satisfaction in your head that you don't have to worry about the game falling apart and breaking, it is, I think, what most people would look for without thinking about it, I think.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I think that also goes hand in hand with the complexity arguments we're talking about, where a lot of games that are sci-fi games in general tend to do this, where they go way too far with the interactability of everything, which is good if you're in like VR. But at certain points, like Red Dead Redemption 2 is, I think, one of my favorite examples of this, of a game that is fantastic, but there are just certain things of them going a little too far into the realism territory of, I don't want to sit here and watch a 5-second animation every time I need to pick something up. it gets old after like 10 times.
And you run into I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but you run into the issue of if you're most of the game is trying to be this like super in-depth, like detailed cowboy simulator, and then there's a moment where you want to switch outfits and you just switch outfits like instantly. Whereas like if it was more consistent with the game, you'd have Arthur get off his horse, pick off his clothes, and then one by one put each individual piece of clothing on. But no one wants to watch that.
Yeah, like, literally nobody wants to play that.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, like
you don't want to watch that.
but like Rockstar was even like, no, we're drawing a line in the sand somewhere. But at that point, it's like, okay, well then you're not
wrong line.
Yeah, well it's like you're not.
It's like you took 2 steps over where the line should have been.
Yeah, some water has washed up from the ocean and blurred the line in the sand a little bit in like that one spot.
Yeah.
But then like no one wants to watch that. But now that you have this issue of like your game isn't consistent anymore. You either have to go all in on the crazy amount of detail, or you have to make it more casual. And trying to strike a balance of both is so difficult. And in an example like that, I don't think it works because it's just uneven.
Yeah.
I think a good recent example of how to like not overly complicate things is Ghost of Tsushima has the ability for you to write haikus.
Oh yeah.
You don't need to actually write a haiku. You just look at the environment and pick the things that are pretty. And then the game spits a haiku at you, which is the perfect amount of complexity for that kind of thing where it's super engaging and it doesn't really get old.
Yeah.
But if it was any more complex, I would be like, okay, I want to get back to the actual things I enjoy.
And because it's a game, it's a very visual way of going about making a haiku like that, and that's the way it should be done. Because like they could have just given you this massive list of like, then you can just like put all these different words together, but that's boring, and it's also not super visual. Whereas what they're doing here is that they know that one of their strong, they know that one of their strongest aspects is the aesthetic and the art design and the environment. So they're gonna lean on that.
Are you playing it in Kurosawa mode, Brett?
Sometimes, because sometimes you can't because it's hard.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima is going to have a Games Club episode probably like in the next 2 weeks. So we'll save the Tsushima talk, but I think it works as an example of where to cut the complexity and make your game a game and not a life sim. And there are people that love the sim heavy stuff. Like Elite Dangerous has a huge audience. No, maybe not huge, but a super dedicated fan base that will always be there because it's exactly what they want. But for the company to capture a larger audience, they need to kind of look at what mainstream audiences want to do. And I think having to command when to scoop fuel out of the sun and then having to have another button to drop cargo at random moments is just not something that most people want to have to remember. And yeah, I think that's like a thing that happens super often with space sims, and why I'm really worried about Starfield, because I feel like Bethesda may not be able to resist either complexifying everything or oversimplifying everything.
Well, we're all worried about Starfield, maybe for different reasons, but we're all worried.
We're all worried about Bethesda in general.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned. I played Fallout 76 last week, and I haven't played it since. I'm definitely going to go back so we can make a video or something on it. But
yeah, I would look. I wouldn't play that game on my own, but if I faced the wilderness with you, I would do it.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Not by myself. No way. That's not happening.
Yeah, I think it's just like an example of a game that is not what it should be. Like, it's not a Fallout game. It should have been either called something different or, it really, in all honesty, probably shouldn't exist. But it
should
does.
Should have just been called Country Roads. Should have just been called Country Roads.
Yeah, I think luckily we don't necessarily have any space games that shouldn't exist. But and it is like a setting that has a ton of versatility. So one of the cooler games I've seen come out recently, into early access, is a game called Hard Space Shipbreaker, which is made by a pretty experienced dev team that did a bunch of RTS games, the Homeworld series.
That's quite the title, my goodness.
Sounds like Space Demolition Derby.
It is. So what it is you're a dude that gets hired to pay out your debt by disassembling spaceships. Which is I think a cool premise for a game. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the game. I don't think it's that intriguing, but a lot of people are. So it's definitely doing something right. And it shows that there's a ton of mechanical versatility in what you can do with space. Because that's like a space game that you don't fly a ship, you don't do anything like that, you don't explore, all you do is break ships apart, and it's still apparently super engaging. So there's definitely a lot of stuff you can do with space as a setting that I think is not being taken advantage of. And like No Man's Sky is continually trying. They're trying every update they release, they're getting a little bit closer to I think the goal.
I'm interested where the game ends, right? Because
Hello Games is developing other things. Like they have other projects they're releasing.
Yeah, they finally announced other projects that they're working on, and because No Man's Sky has such like vast and kind of vague goals in a way in terms of like how can we turn space into a video game, they can release updates forever covering different aspects of what they've made. Like yeah. It's one of those games where it's like you can keep releasing content that'll constantly be changing the game because it's space. There's so much you could do, you know?
Yeah, there's so much potential. And it's a weird thing that I think it's kind of like feudal Japan with Ghost of Tsushima. It's a setting that we don't see often in games, but that seems super popular. Like a lot of people always ask for this type of game, and it's not something we get at a high polish level. I mean, a lot of people try to make space sims, but very few succeed, and there's basically been no AAA attempts in a long, long time since like the original Elite era of games.
I mean, it like, you know, whenever you're developing a game, you have to keep in mind scope. And as soon as you say, let's have our game take place in space, scope destroyed. You immediately overscope with one sentence, you know?
This is why I'm so curious as to how Starfield's going to turn out. I am so curious.
I'm terrified, to be honest with you. More than curious, I'm just terrified.
I want to play it and see what it is. That's the biggest thing. I just want to know what it is. Okay, so we talked about a lot of this, but I have one burning question. I think it's a burning question that's shared by a lot of the gaming community. And it's one I don't know if we'll ever get an answer to. When will Star Citizen come out?
No.
Before The Elder Scrolls 6.
Before or after Starfield? That's a good question.
No. You know what? Even better than that, it's going to come out before Good and Evil 2. Or Beyond Good and Evil 2.
Yeah, that's it.
No.
Beyond Good and Evil 2, that's a space game, apparently.
Another repressed memory that you brought back to the surface. Why?
What was the last footage we saw of that was at least 3 years ago, I think.
They showed they showed off some like super like early gameplay after that reveal trailer.
Yeah, but that was still like 3 years ago, right?
No, that was like why do I care? But it's like a couple years ago.
I think it was 2017. Yeah, it was 2017. It's been 3 years.
That hurts.
Yeah, it's been 3 years since we've had a large amount of news about it. There's apparently been some dev streams and updates, but from what I'm seeing, they've not been like gameplay or anything. It's more just like discussions and talking with people.
How long has this game been in development?
See, the curious thing to me is that game had a really polished CG trailer that has to have taken a long time to make. So the game has to have been in development for long enough for that trailer to get made.
I mean, they're done with the concept phase.
Okay, Google says 3 years, but it's been in development longer than 3 years.
I mean, probably not much longer. I'm betting that trailer was the first thing they did.
Like they've started development like 5 or 6 times or something.
Yeah, but in reality, that doesn't mean that development continues.
No, but like I want to know the total time in terms of like when it was originally concepted, like despite how many times they've dropped it.
I'm hesitant to call it development hell.
Development purgatory.
Yeah, it's more like development limbo or purgatory. It's just stuck there. It'll probably come out. It's with Shenmue. It feels like
one of those games that just won't come out. I don't know.
Another science fiction fantasy space game. Prey.
Yeah, Prey came out.
Well, which Prey are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about the one that's more recent. This is a podcast for people that are listening to gaming podcasts now and a lot of people love Prey, but probably not the audience of this. Yeah, the newer Prey is great. I don't think it did tremendously well.
I don't think so.
And it doesn't seem like we're getting a sequel anytime soon.
It had that
Yeah.
it had some super wacky like DLC too. One of them was like
It had a prop hunt DLC.
it had a prop hunt DLC, and then also because they showed this off the year I went to E3, but they also had like a roguelike.
Yeah, they did. I remember that.
Which was super cool. I was able to play it. It was actually super cool.
I mean, I think the DLCs have been pretty well received for Prey.
Mhm.
I think Prey in general was well received. It's just not what fans of the franchise were not expecting it to be that.
They shouldn't have called it Prey.
Yeah.
No,
It should have been a new
different
IP.
game from what I remember. The reviews that I saw.
It doesn't deserve like the shit that it got because it's called Prey, but it was a bad idea to call it Prey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also kind of locked them out of revisiting the older Prey.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, there's always a chance. Like Devil May Cry did it, where we got DMC, and then we eventually got Devil May Cry 5.
They could
But
do a
those were
re-release.
developed by different studios, and it was a different situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully we'll get an actual Prey sequel at some point. But as of now, it's seeming pretty unlikely. New Prey is good, but it'll be confusing, like because like now they either have to make sequels to the new one or the old one, or none at all.
Maybe like a spiritual successor sort of thing will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could
And I mean,
see
I'm
that.
still
Probably
mad
be
at them for
those three,
making the indie game renamed to Pray for the Gods, where they had to put the A in the E instead of just having it be E because Bethesda sued them or someone sued them for the Prey video game name because they were using Prey in their title.
They're gonna make a spiritual successor to the original Prey, and they're just gonna call it Prey again.
Pray again.
Try again.
Right again.
Prey again.
Oh my god. Pray 2, pray harder. All right. This is why you listen to this podcast. It's the peak of comedy.
Of course.
So yeah, we've talked a lot about space sims and sci-fi. There's some games I think we can count into the weird science fantasy section that I don't think a lot of people think about. We got Mario Galaxy. Is that a science fiction game?
Yeah,
Science fantasy for sure.
Science fantasy, yeah.
maybe just a bit.
There's rumors we might be getting some remasters, which I hope we do.
On the Switch, I
On the
guess?
Switch, yeah.
There's some pretty substantial rumors we're getting Galaxy, at least a Galaxy game remastered for the 35th Mario anniversary, which is coming up. But we don't have any real news yet. There's a lot of leaks, but no one really knows if they're true, and Nintendo leaks are notoriously volatile.
Mm,
So we're not sure, but that would be definitely very fun. Yeah, that's like the weirdest game I think I can think of as fitting in with science fantasy
Well,
stuff.
you know what series we can technically loop into science fiction?
Oh boy.
Call of Duty. Technically speaking,
I mean, I don't think
They
it's
had
really
a
a
game-
technically.
they had a
They
game in
had,
space. They
it's-
had a game
yeah.
in space. Yeah,
I mean,
and they
Infinite
had, like-
Warfare and Advanced Warfare are definitely
it
science.
had like starship combat.
Yeah,
which
it
I
had
heard was
starship
actually
combat.
kind of.
Wait,
I
it
actually heard
did?
that was really good. Like I heard that was like one of the best parts of the campaign was that it had these
Yeah.
sections where you played in these like starships.
What I
Yeah.
heard that was the problem with that part is that it just happened too often,
Yeah,
and people just missed the missions
Aw.
where you would just have a normal mission.
yeah.
Yeah, people probably aren't playing the first person shooter Call of Duty for like flight combat,
Yeah.
gunfighting, duel.
Honestly,
dogfighting.
no. Here's the thing. I almost bought Infinite Warfare because I was like, damn, it has this cool like ship combat thing. What else you got? I almost bought it because of that alone. I was like, oh, it almost seems like they're trying to do something a lot different with the campaign that they haven't done before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just don't know if Call of Duty is the franchise for that.
Yeah, because I think even the fans have a certain expectation for what a COD game's going to be, and you can only, as Infinity Ward or Treyarch or Sledgehammer or whatever, you can only stray so far from that before no one likes it anymore.
Well, it almost seems like Activision wants it to be like Mario in the sense that they could have it in any kind of weird ass setting that they want. You know, because of Mario as a character, Nintendo has this incredible freedom of like, oh, let's put him in space. Let's, have him jump on dinosaur heads. Let's have him.
Goku.
Let's turn them 2D.
Let's have him beat the shit out of Sonic and Samus. Why the hell not?
Bowser bored him.
Like there's a lot of flexibility that they have with that franchise, and I feel like Activision tries to do that, and it doesn't. It's interesting. It doesn't work because it's Call of Duty.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Generic man with gun is Activision's Mario.
It's the man on the cover of every Call of Duty game is.
I can respect the attempts to try and shake things up.
He's
Yeah.
because there's a
But
skull.
there are things where it's like because like Black Ops 2, still the best COD campaign ever, has like branching storylines. There's like one scene that can play out in like 15 different ways. There's multiple different endings. That's cool. That's something you can work into a COD game and it works. Space combat is harder to justify.
Yeah. I feel like anything with vehicles is just not COD.
Yeah, that's more Battlefield's
Yeah.
thing, which is why I think Battlefront is a good topic for this, because we have attempts at space combat.
I am of the
Yeah,
opinion that the
Star Wars games
Starfighter
come out.
combat is the best part of that
It-
game.
Oh, it rocks. And
Compared to all the other vehicles too.
That's coming from someone who like doesn't understand flight controls in any video game and can't wrap his head around them. It doesn't care. The starship combat in this game rules. It's awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah,
I'm,
and again,
I'm hyped for
like-
Squadron.
Like what Brett said,
Same.
in comparison to the way that the other vehicles handle, because they're an absolute trash dumpster fire. Like
Yep.
they suck.
I mean, if you
I
think
love
about
that
it,
game.
Wyatt, if you think about it, Wyatt, in the sky, there's no ground to clip into, so you just don't have to worry
Yeah.
about it.
There's
The
no
colliders
ground.
are so much easier. Yeah, I mean,
And-
space, if you think about it, really is just a money-saving measure, because you don't have to have collision.
Think about how many games back, when the Atari 2600 was like the big new thing. Think of how many games were set in space because they just
You're
need a
right.
black background
Yeah.
with some white dots. Space. There you go.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, Space War was like the first thing, right? So we have a ton of. It was something that was huge for a long time, and I think we still get a lot of things that are kind of themed around space. We have Japan is still going crazy with all their 2D shoot 'em ups set in spaceships. Those are still wildly popular. We just don't have any like AAA quality stuff. I think that is
Well, again, it's
specifically
kinda like,
taking advantage of it.
kind of going along with what I said earlier. It's a lot easier to use a sci-fi setting as a way to have a lot of interesting mechanics in a game, but it's a lot harder to actually grasp the concepts of science fiction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like just being able to use the setting for mechanics, there you go. Like you can justify so much. Oh, it's in the future, or it's different planet, or whatever. But like actually grasping the concepts of like how that technology would work is so much harder.
Yeah,
That's
and
why
that goes back to sort of how this would work in VR. Sort of it's bringing you into it, but it's separating you from the setting being space at the same time. Whereas I think that the closest thing that I can think to a peripheral working for that would either be you in an Oculus Rift in a wind tunnel or suspended in a big fish tank.
I just have the image of like Mark Zuckerberg in an Oculus suspended in a fish tank now, and it's very funny.
I'm trying to drink water at the same time. His weird ass like puckered face.
Hey, don't be mean. We try not to be mean on this show.
Do we?
Occasionally.
We've been shitting on Bethesda, low key.
I mean, so we do have one game that is kind of AAA, Outer Worlds, which went into this territory. We say kind of AAA because it has a fraction of the budget of most AAA games, and it's made by a studio that's a fair bit smaller. But I think it definitely did succeed at doing what it intended to do and getting people interested in this weird corporate solar system setting.
Yeah.
But it still is like you don't do any of the space stuff. You're still always on planets. It's more Fallout-y in how it operates.
Yeah, and the sci-fi setting again is kind of like, oh, we can make a bunch of crazy, weird-looking plants and planets and stuff because it's a different. So.
I mean, in reality, this entire podcast is just a way for me to say I really want a game to do boarding of space stations so we can like raid a space station. That's like my game dream is Starfield, get on it. We can have like a fleet of ships. We raid a space station. Everyone gets off, and you see like a Dynasty Warriors rampage in a space
Oh
station.
my
Don't
god,
worry, Ryan.
that would be
No,
awesome.
Ryan, don't worry. There will be 15 times the spaceboarding that you would ever want. 15 times.
16 times the detail.
Oh my
Speaking of-
god.
That makes me think that the creators of Assassin's Creed, especially
Oh
with,
yeah,
Black Flag, Odyssey, and Valhalla, with their ship mechanics, they could probably do it convincingly.
I think they could. I think you could literally port Odyssey's mechanics into a science fantasy game with just like make it melee weapons for some reason, and then you can port that mechanic over and just make the seas like scale you out to be in a ship in third person, and then you've got it.
Actually, an interesting in between to that would be sort of a Disney's Treasure Planet as a video game.
I would love
Oh,
that.
that would be cool.
That would be crazy.
That's such a cool like pirate space setting.
Yeah,
I
Disney,
really-
you're sitting on some big bucks.
Well, honestly, and like talking about shipboarding, like if they were to make a sequel to Mass Effect Andromeda, that would be the next big thing. Would be to have like,
Yeah.
space combat, which is, if you know about the development of Andromeda, like flying around to different planets, kind of No Man's Sky style was the original idea, but
Yeah.
they were such an inexperienced team that they had to really scale things back, which was why the planet map or the galaxy map was rendered in real time, was because that was the original idea. And they could do that, like, honestly, like even if people aren't down with the characters, like having them have like ship battles and like boarding enemy ships and stuff, have that be in their sequel, I think that would get a lot of people on board, even if they weren't
Absolutely.
fans of Andromeda.
I mean, it's like the original Battlefront 2 is still one of my favorite games, even though the mechanics for the space stuff aren't great. The ability to get on your ship, fly to the enemy ship, and get off, and then go inside and blow up the interior is just something that has not been done since.
Yeah,
And it's super disappointing because even then, even though it's super simple, it works really well and it sells the idea that you're doing that.
Because it's cool.
Yeah, it's so cool.
and having the freedom to take out different parts of the ship,
Yeah.
Yeah,
because that was a big thing with, like, as much as we were just gushing about the ship combat in the new Battlefront 2, it's still very linear objectives where it's like you have to hit this thing when we tell you to, whereas in the original it's like, oh, you can hit their life support systems, their shields, their weapons or whatever.
Thrusters, everything.
Yeah, and it all affects different parts of the ship, like you blow it, like
and it's a ton
almost
of fun.
Yeah, it's almost strategic in a way, because it's like blowing up this part means that the enemy team no longer has this, or
And,
this
and for a
becomes
multiplayer game, it gives you a really good sense of like being a squad, of like your job is to go take out the shields or the turret or the engines.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like Battlefront could really capitalize on that. Like
You
even
know
if they keep
what?
the mechanics the same, on that, having that type of gameplay, like Battlefront already has squads. So if you really want to sell it, have like a squad order. So squads in multiplayer matches have different objectives. I would love that.
Exactly.
Oh, Ryan.
Like-
Exactly.
I'm hoping Squadron realizes something close to this. Like,
I don't know what the disparity is between like DICE making Battlefront and Battlefield, where they just decided to make the squad mechanics like completely useless.
yeah,
But like
Well-
almost everything, almost everything that we're talking about right now was done in Battlefield 2042 and also in Battlefield 4
yeah,
for a DLC, because there's a game mode called Carrier Assault, and in Battlefield 4 it was aircraft carriers, but it was like a normal game of conquest with, I think, like fewer objectives or something in the middle of the map on all these islands that you can go to on boats or fly to on helicopters or hovercraft or something, and it's just like holding objectives, and whoever holds the most
absolutely.
damages the other ship, and then you get to board the ship and blow it up from the inside.
It's
Oh,
so
it's
cool. It's so cool.
I think it stems from them wanting to really like streamline Battlefront and make it more casual, which to a certain degree I understand, because first of all, it's a lower age rating, and also it's a
Yeah.
Star Wars game. So you have a much wider like fan base and a much wider age gap or age range of people. So I understand wanting to make it more
Yeah,
simple, and they probably also want to avoid the whole, oh, it's just a reskinned Battlefield, even though that would have been probably a lot better than what we ended up getting.
Fine.
Yeah,
Dude,
I mean, I don't think anyone would care if it was a recent Battlefield.
If I had never played Battlefront 2, the new one, and someone told me, "Oh yeah, it's just Battlefield 4 with like a Star Wars skin," I'm like, "Sign me up! That sounds awesome. That sounds great."
Yeah.
Then you would have vehicles that don't, control like ass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. I'm excited to see what Squadrons does. I really hope these rumored Star Wars games that are maybe in development pan out, at least a few of them, and we get some like cool new settings, because Star Wars as a franchise commands so much power that I think it will kind of make people want to buy those games regardless of what they are, and maybe make people interested in some new genres. But yeah, we're overtime, which means we got to do our final segment, which is called Shoutouts. Brett, you haven't done this before, but it's pretty simple. All you do, you shout out something you enjoyed, or maybe just like a thing that happened this week, and you just want to say, like, I don't know, my toaster broke or something. I want to shout that out. You could do that. That's not what happened. But
how do you know? Maybe it did. Now you're making fun
maybe
of
it did. All right. So I'll start, and then we'll just go in some order. My shout out's going to be reusable water bottles. They're a lot of fun. You go down, you get your water, you come back up, especially if they're vacuum sealed and you have like a nice 24-hour cold thing of water. It's great. All right. Someone else go.
Shout out to, I'm gonna try and pronounce this man's name. I apologize in advance. Elon Eshkiri, who he was the composer for Tsushima's score. Well done, sir.
Oh.
Well, frickin' done.
He's actually only one of them.
Yeah, there were
so
two.
maybe do your
there?
research. There was
That's
two,
right.
actually.
No, that is correct.
No.
All right, moving on. We got to keep this snappy. Brett, it's your turn. Alex, it's your turn.
All right. Sort of copying you, Ryan, but not really.
Yeah.
Because technically, shout out to metal straws that are extendable.
Oh yeah.
Collapsible pointer type deal. They're very fun.
I need to get one of those.
That's sci-fi right there.
We're in the
That's
future.
future.
Pod racing. I mean sci-fi.
We still got Brett. We still got one person left.
My shout out, it sounds cheesy until I explain it, is my mom, because she came downstairs while I was watching my friend, whose name is also Ryan, play Ghost of Tsushima, and she was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I explained it to her, and then she said she wanted to watch it, and then she told me to buy it, so I bought it, and that's why I have it.
Nice.
Nice.
All right, so that's our shout out segment. Normally we would end the podcast here, but I do want to say, if you're listening, you might have noticed that we have music. Whoa.
Look at that.
There's some minor production value behind this show now. We also have, if you're watching the YouTube videos, we have Wyatt. I got to do the explanation here. All right?
I apologize. Forgive me.
We got to sell the show. We got to advertise, all right? We got new graphics for the YouTube VODs. We have some Twitch stuff. If you come to the Twitch, you can see the show live. It's not just a white screen now. It's great. We'll hopefully have an overlay sometime in the future so we can actually do like video versions of this, which would be fun. But yeah, we're working on that. So, Wyatt, what were you gonna say? What was your bit of wisdom for us today?
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's almost like we're a real podcast now.
Oh yeah, it almost is.
We're big budget. Ooh.
Ooh.
All right. So without further ado, you can catch this podcast Monday mornings on Anchor and YouTube, or live, usually Sundays around 8 on the Twitch channel on the screen. We hope you join us next week. And with that, we're done.
Is there outro music?
Yeah, there's outro. You gotta not talk.